A lot of people that get very far in life, they meditate. You know, the biggest names in the world that I've had on the podcast, you've got your Huberman, McConaughey, they all meditate because it settles the mind. And Rumi, who is a Persian poet from the 19th century, he says, why do you put yourself in jail when the door is wide open?
Sarah Grynberg, best-selling author and creator of A Life of Greatness, a million-download podcast. She's interviewed hundreds of world leaders, billionaires, and icons, searching for what makes someone great. After years and years of asking, she's found the answers.
The mind doesn't know the difference between when you experience it with your eyes closed or when you experience it with your eyes open.
You've interviewed now over 500 people. You're one of the OG podcasters in Australia. We're talking world leaders. We're talking billionaires, celebrities, and it's on the topic of greatness. Like, what do you see from these guests that you've observed that separates them in terms of greatness from everyone else?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean,
Sarah Grynberg, welcome to Flow Zone.
thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to be interviewing you. I went and watched one of your talks recently with Dr. Stacey Sims at the Recital Centre in Melbourne, a live podcast with like a global health leader. How was that doing it live?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I love a live audience because, as you would know, doing a podcast, like we're sitting here today and there are two producers in the background, but that's it. And then you put the episode out and you'll get some emails or some messages from people, but you don't see their faces. You don't see how it impacts them. And then doing the live stuff, which I've done for a couple of years now, it is just so satisfying being able to see people smile, people laugh. Even when I'm doing keynote speeches, you know, seeing tears roll down people's eyes. I love it. I love it. I love having the feedback straight away from the audience. That lights me up more than anything.
Oh, there's nothing like that. From live music performance that I've been involved in since I was 7. It's instant and it's palpable. You can feel it. There's an energy in the room. It shifts, but it also has its drops as well and creates a little bit of space to pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you can tell. I did a lot of live stuff last year. I was at Wonderlust just before actually I did the tour, and I was sitting on 5 panels and I did 3 interviews there. I did so much stuff. I loved it. And again, I was watching the audience, the way that they would, you know, react to a story. I could tell the things that they were engaged in, the things that maybe they weren't as much, and that feeds you as well. And it also allows you, from, you know, just a perspective of getting better at your craft, to know what lands and what doesn't, right? So it could be a joke, or it could be, you know, whatever it is that you're talking about. You can gauge it much better when you've got a live audience there.
Absolutely. Well, talking about audiences, like you've interviewed now over 500 people. You're one of the OG podcasters in Australia. We're talking world leaders. We're talking billionaires, celebrities, and it's on the topic of greatness. Like, what do you see from these guests that you've observed that separates them in terms of greatness from everyone else?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I feel so honoured to have sat with such amazing, amazing people, and some of them are big names and some of them are not, which doesn't make them any less great if they're not. What do I observe? The number one thing is that they want to give back. They want to give back to their community. They want to give back to be able to teach people what they have learned. It's not all me, what's in it for me. It's we. You know, how do I grow from this? But at the same time, how do I allow others to grow? That's a big part of it. Obviously, I'm a mindset coach and I've done a lot of work to do with the mind. And these people have been able to use their mind in a way that's allowed them to live a life that they've been able to achieve, right? Everyone will have bad stuff happen to them. You know, usually the people that come onto my podcast have had a lot of bad stuff that happened to them in one way or another. But they've taken those situations and rather than drowning in them, they've used them to be able to fly higher in life. I would say that those were the main things that the people that I have interviewed have within them that sets them apart and has allowed them to achieve greatness.
That's a powerful observation, and you're so concise. We can tell who we're dealing with here. But, you actually worked with people like Hamish and Andy for years. I think you've produced their podcast, like you launched it and got it to #1 in Australia. How was that?
I mean, we were joking about this before. I have to admit, I don't think that it was all me that did that. Not even, maybe I was a little part of it. Obviously, those boys are just unbelievable people, really. Hamish and Andy are exactly what you see on TV, what you listen to on the podcast, what you used to hear on radio is exactly the people that they are. And I think also to what we were talking about earlier, authenticity, right? They are the most authentic people. And so to work with them was a gift to me to be able to start the podcast, be at that pivotal entry point where we started the podcast together. There was a wonderful team that I worked with, and it was 4 years that I was their executive producer, and I swear to God I loved every single moment of it. And the only reason I left is because I had my own podcast on the side. I was wanting to write a book, and I was shifting at that time. I was shifting out of producing, so it was the last thing that I produced, and it was just a wonderful experience to also learn from two experts in their field, and they actually taught me a lot as well about how to manage people, how to lead with grace and empathy, and also get the best out of your employers too. So, it was incredible experience.
I'm sure we can dive into that a little bit during this conversation. There's going to be a lot of topics we can talk about. That, about your own personal arc, I suppose. Like, you've gone from producing Australia's biggest breakfast radio shows and those kind of on radio as the platform to then building, you went through a bit of a burnout phase, and then you've gone on to build a personal brand that's now attracting in such a magnetic way. You're getting people like Matthew McConaughey, Andrew Huberman. Like, these are global figures that many people call idols. Walk me through that transformation.
Yeah. And, even before that, I started in a corporate environment and worked, kind of in marketing and PR within, some of the biggest banks in Australia and other huge corporations within Australia. And then I knew from a young age that I wanted to work in entertainment. And so then when I got the job at Austereo, which is sort of, in Melbourne, the Fox and Triple M network, and I started within there, and I was I wasn't actually producing initially. I was working within activation. So I was doing a lot of talent management, a lot of deals, and then doing a lot of the events and activations for the different radio shows. Wanted to do producing, made sure that I put my hand up, and unpaid, came in. And at the time I was working for the Hot Breakfast, wasn't working. I was sitting in on the show that was Eddie Maguire and Luke Darcy and Mick Malloy, and they had like two of the best producers in the country. So to be able to sit with them, again, as I said, totally unpaid, waking up before my normal job that I had at the station, and just being able to learn from the best in the business. And then after I'd finished my job, I would stay later, and again, I'd sit in on the night shows, and I would just learn again from these incredible producers. And I did that for a period of time, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I didn't care that I was working long hours. And then the head of the network at the time really tapped me on the back and said, we've got a breakfast show on the weekend. And I was like, sure, I'll do that. So I was doing my normal 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job, and then I was working on the weekends as a producer. Again, loved it. I had 2 kids, and I was kind of doing that really when I was pregnant. And then also I came back early from maternity leave to just kind of work at that producing role. Again, the head of the network saw that I was doing well and I was eager, and there was a show that I was also producing on a Sunday night, and they said, this show is doing well. We want it to become the breakfast radio show, and it'll be the Sydney breakfast radio show, but we're going to do it from Melbourne because the talent were in Melbourne. And I thought, my God, what an opportunity. And at that time, I was getting paid more money than I ever was because, you wake up at 3 a.m. 5 days a week. And I did have a 2 and a 4-year-old as well. And it went from, oh, my God, this job, what an incredible opportunity, to a few months down the track and going into Melbourne winter, where the 3 a.m. wake-ups 5 days a week with a 2 and a 4-year-old it just got me, and I was exhausted. Not only that, that's the sort of role I was doing. You had to be on 24/7. It wasn't like I clocked out of a certain time and I didn't check my phone again. You were always checking your phone till late at night. And then, you'd be worried that you wouldn't be able to sleep properly. So then you couldn't fall asleep. So then it was like many, many weeks of not sleeping properly and just feeling like complete jet lag, which ended up, culminating in complete burnout. And it was during that time where I was at my lowest, where I did think to myself, I need to make changes in my life. And I'd heard a lot about this idea of the mind-body connection, and it always really interested me, the psychology behind why some people are happier than others. And I really kind of moved into that path of trying to read as many books as I could, understanding what this all meant, and then applying it to myself. And honestly, because I was in such a desperate position for knowledge and wanting to get out of the way that I was feeling so sad, so run down, wanting to change my life, that everything that I learned, I started implementing. And I was so strict about it because I was feeling so crap. And after a short period of time, honestly, what I was implementing was changing the way that my life started moving. And then I ended up leaving the radio role and got the opportunity, because at the time where I was at, they started this podcast arm and they said, we want you to move into our podcast arm. And I remember, this is so funny, because podcasting was at its infancy, I thought, podcasting. I'm not sure about this medium. And I had just listened to Serial. Do you remember the podcast Serial,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
It was like one of the first podcasts. It was excellent. It was a crime, it was a crime podcast. And I remember thinking that was kind of good. All right. And they were saying you've got to learn how to edit and things that didn't really honestly interest me. But I thought, then they said you can be Hamish and Andy's producer, like confidentially. They're moving off radio to producing. You can be their EP, which is like the highest ranked producer.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, what an opportunity. So I moved out of radio and went into podcasting, started producing The Boys. I moved into true crime podcasting and did that for a while. And then I had this idea only a couple months in, like, my life has changed in such a radical way because of the knowledge of what I've learned about mindset and moving through the world. Why wouldn't I teach that to other people? And that's when I came up with the idea of a life of greatness. I was like, I know how to produce. I have a studio here, dozens of studios. I'm working at the biggest radio station in the country. And I put a plan together, and my boss at the time was like, sure, just try it out. And honestly, it was like, in the first season, because we worked in seasons at that time, where I maybe recorded like 10 episodes, I got Hamish Blake, obviously, because, I was working with him. So what a great get.
Good kickoff.
A guy called Dr. Joe Dispenza, who is
I know Joe Dispenza's
huge,
work.
and some other really big names. So as soon as I launched that first season, I had these amazing, amazing guests on, and it just it got big straight away. And then it moved from there. And I eventually left The Boys, as I mentioned, and moved into writing a book, public speaking, and doing the podcast full time. So, yeah, it's been a really great journey. Bumps along the way, as everyone has. Times where I'm like, oh, this is full on. But I absolutely, hand on heart, love what I do. And I couldn't feel more blessed to feel exhausted or tired sometimes by the work that I do. What a gift, honestly.
That's incredible. Wow, that's like a podcast journey in itself. And thanks for sharing that. I want to double click on the part of it where you did go through the hard part.
Yeah.
If that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
Because so many people are listening to this now and they're like, oh, wow, I can do this, which is what we want, right? We are inspiring. A lot of our audience is entrepreneurial. Yet there comes that rub, like there's a huge opportunity, but you're at your lowest energy point at the same time. So you're given this huge opportunity, you're going through the Dr. Joe Dispenza mindset kind of approach to things. And you said it was only like a few months where you started to get the turnaround. In order to take on that amount of new content, new learning, there is time put into that. And then there's time doing the practices, there's time in changing your behavior. Like that's energetic work there. Plus you're still getting up pretty early. You haven't just thrown the towel in. What did you give away in order to create space for that sort of stuff? The how-to in this transformation is very interesting to me.
Firstly, I was coming from a place of being extremely desperate. Like I was so unhappy and exhausted that I would take anything to get out of there, right? And when I say desperate, not in a need where I still had my senses about me. So it wasn't like I was going down this angle and just whoever would come along, not at all. But I was desperate to feel better.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're in that situation of rock bottom, that's when you have the great changes in life. Like no one learns anything from a comfort zone. And I wish we did, but we don't.
Yeah.
Majority of people, nearly everyone learns at their hardest moments. You know, you have a business deal that doesn't work out the way you want it to go. You feel crap. You're sad. You've learnt though, right? What can I do better next time? And this situation, I was just wanting to change the way that I was thinking about life and my mindset. So what did I do? Meditation was one of the biggest things. And I say that in a way that, you know, it isn't woo-woo. A lot of people that get very far in life, they meditate. You know, the biggest names in the world that I've had on the podcast, they all meditate. You've got your Huberman, McConaughey, they all meditate. Why? Because it settles the mind, right? And I had this crazy out of control mind that was thinking 100 things at any one time. And so when I would go into that quiet space, I was able to then, relax, right? And then the more that you do that and the more you're forced to, you know, be able to say a mantra or think about your breath or whatever it is, if you're, you know, listening to a guided meditation, whatever that is, you are slowing your brain waves down. When you slow your brain waves down, when you go into your eyes open life, you're able to not react in silly ways that you may have done before. You take time to think about things. You don't get as angry as easily. Like everything was helping me from that position. Then I learned something that I loved, and it was to do with visualization, right? And a lot of athletes use this. A lot of musicians use this. A lot of police people use this. I saw recently actually some footage of it was men that were in the armed forces in America using this, right? The idea that maybe it is towards the end of your meditation that within the eyes closed time, you will think about the things that you want to create in your life and you'll imagine them with such emotional force, like they are already with you, that it is like they're real. And when you're doing that, say the way that athletes would do it was, say it's a runner or a sprinter, and they would imagine themselves winning that race, but they would imagine, you know, their feet on the ground, what it feels like, the wind in their face. So they did research on this and they found that the athletes and the musicians that were doing the visualization as well as practicing, you can't just do one without the other, were 70% better than the people that were just practicing, right? So if you can combine the two, the visualization and then going out and actually doing the work, then your ability to get there is so much faster. And when you get there, you've already thought about it in your mind. So it's not like a shock to you. It's like, okay, the live shows, I thought about them in my mind for a good year before I did them. So then I'm sitting on the stage and I'm like, it's like I'm awake in my dream, right? It's I've been thinking about this moment for the last year and here I am. And honestly, to put that all together and have only been imagining it for a year, and then there I am with like Stacey, who is basically one of the biggest names in women's health in the world, is a pretty incredible thing. So that aspect became fun to me as well. And then it was all about how do I get out of a negative mindset and what are the things that I need to do to be able to change the way I'm thinking and go from a lack mentality to a mentality where it's like, no, I am able to be able to do these things. I can be, if it was the best producer in the world, I can have a podcast or whatever it was, rather than I'm not good enough to do that. I'm exhausted. So it was changing the way that I would think too. And I went on to do all those things. And as I mentioned, only in a short period of time did I see that my life started changing for the better as well. So when you're having that feedback from the changes that you're making, of course, that means that, oh my God, I want to go on and keep doing these things, right? So
we don't always need a lot of positive reinforcement to keep going in a direction. I have found personally. It's sometimes, and I know this is an entrepreneurial thing, can be an ADHD thing, just like having the mind in many places at once, about trying to solve multiple problems before they've even come up, and then getting completely disconnected from the present. You mentioned Joe Dispenza before, and I've just gotten his new book, New You Life, and he talks about the personality being a set of decisions that are based on beliefs, which are a set of decisions that have been made, and whether we're spending time in the past, living that same past every single day, 90% of the thoughts you have every day are the same ones that you've already had, and actually going from the present and going out and creating the future where the body can't tell that the mind is thinking in the future, and then you start to live the positive. It sounds like you've been able to bring that into your world in order to make that transformation.
Well, it's not solely his work. I've touched on that a bit, but it's basically a lot of what I've learned through just mindset psychology, a lot of what I've learned through Buddhism, a lot of what I've learned through different sort of practices. What is interesting is when it comes to beliefs, and I find this phrase something that once you actually really think about it, it's so potent. A belief is just a thought you keep thinking, nothing more. A belief is just a thought you keep thinking. So when you know that, then why wouldn't you change your negative belief to a positive one? It's only a belief you keep thinking. Just because you think it doesn't make it real, right? Majority, as you touched on, majority of the thoughts that we have are not real. I think we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. As you mentioned, majority of them are repetitive, and I think it's something like 80% are negative, right? So when we know that, okay, this is not empowering me, this is making me feel worse. So how can I shift the way that I move through the world to be able to live one that is going to allow me to flourish? And these are the ways that I was thinking, and the changes that I started making to be able to move me in a different direction. I had a real lack mentality when I was younger. And when I say lack, I mean it more so in the always think of the worst thing. So when something bad happens, you already had thought of it. Well, what's that setting you up for, right? It's setting you up for only having negative things come your way. It was also the idea that I came from a family who were the most loving people in the world, but from a protection perspective, they would worry a lot. They would worry if I left their house and I wasn't wearing a jacket, or, I'd get too cold, or if I was driving at nighttime, all these sort of things. And when you grow up in a family that is absolutely so loving but worries the whole time, what do you start doing? You worry about everything. You worry about your boss putting the meeting in your calendar and thinking, what is he putting the meeting in? He didn't make a reason why. Is there something wrong? And you're lying there awake the whole night thinking he's going to fire you. Like, that was my thought process for a very long period of time. And I didn't want it to be anymore. That was suffering. And Rumi, who is a Persian poet from the 19th century, he's got this beautiful quote. He says, "Why do you put yourself in jail when the door is wide open?" And it talks to the mind. And I was putting myself in a jail that I had the key to the door. But I just didn't know how to open it properly. And so learning all this information allowed me to be able to step through that door and then move on to leading a better life.
That's incredible. It's really incredible to experience it from someone who's been able to take these principles that we've heard of But I think particularly those that are kind of wired for business and scaling, they often look at that and go, oh yeah, that's really good. You're sitting on top of a mountain all day, but I'm busy. I can't do this. Whereas that was in the peak of your busyness. You're able to transform that, change your mind, and then of course, change how your body operates and be in a totally new state. Now, no doubt that's going to be referred to a little bit in your book that you released last year.
Yes, absolutely. The whole story's in there, yeah.
I was going to say, we could end up doing a whole, basically a book episode here, but I really do encourage people to get that because I'm sitting here across someone who has transformed properly. I've seen you on stage. I've observed you. Now you're on my podcast, so there's some sort of manifestation in that as well.
Absolutely.
It's really great to see in real life.
And sometimes also what I find is there's a lot of people that go through terrible things, right? And as I said, I interview them. And I don't think burnout is the worst thing in the world, thank God, right? But it was pretty bad for me at the time, but it's very relatable. So a lot of people obviously can relate to that story because they've been in a situation where they might have burnt out or they're worried a lot. And that's why I find people come to my work because they're able to relate to something in it because it's so similar to what a lot of us are going through.
I think everyone has a moment where they go through or a period where they go through that dark night of the soul, like I've heard you describe it as, and some of my other guests have. It only becomes meaningful when we kind of use that to make a change.
Well, that's it. Some people don't make the change, and then that's the path that they end up going through for the rest of their life, which is not a happy life.
Yes.
And to me, that's a bit sad, but we have the choice. We always have a choice.
And we've got the power to influence others as well. You've been documenting basically a story as you've been going with this, sort of like what I'm doing here as I grow my audience of like-minded people that are global. So we're all connected and can help each other move forward. Talking about how far it did move forward for you, though, quite quickly. And one of the key skills that I've picked up you speaking about on your audio and in the literature you've put out is the power of observation. Now, you've been able to observe Hamish and Andy in a leadership context you were speaking about, and the likes of Andrew Huberman, Matthew McConaughey, onto your podcast. What are the things that you've observed when you've been in this process? And I'm going to put this through a frame to make it a little bit narrower. Personal brands are one of the biggest changes that we've seen come into our world here in 2026. I would say we're in the age of AI and personal brands. You've got some of the biggest personal brands there. They're sitting across the table from you on your show now. What have you observed from them about how they've gone on to build their personal brand and how they conduct themselves in these sort of podcast style settings?
Yes, that's such a great question. You mentioned Hamish and Andy, Andrew Huberman, Matthew McConaughey. And then you know what came to my mind straight away? The word kind. They are all such kind people. Hamish and Andy, obviously, as I talked about earlier, I knew them very well. Absolutely so kind, so generous. Huberman. We did the podcast together. I flew up to Sydney. It was the only podcast interview he did when he was in Australia. We sat opposite each other for about an hour and a half. He was kind. He was talkative. When the mics were off, he chatted about a lot of things. He was warm. And something as well, he was a person of his word. Touching on Matthew McConaughey, back to kindness, he was the same. I interviewed him when he'd written the book Green Lights. And it was over, I think we used Zoom at the time. That's how long ago it was. And there was no publicist on the line. There was no one. He literally would have put in the Zoom details, clicked on the link and came on, right? It was him and I. And at the time, it was funny. We didn't have the glamorous studios that I'm used to now. I had this little radio booth, and it was when video, I think it was the early stages of video coming in, so it was kind of like not great quality cameras and stuff like that. Anyway, and it was COVID. And I think it was also getting up to the American presidency, like the election. I think it was the election that Biden got in. And we were just talking about America. We were talking about COVID. It was interesting. He was interested, right? He wasn't like, come on, press the Zoom thing. All right, let's get to it, right? He was lovely. He was courteous. He was kind. And all these people displayed that. And I would think that they were the most authentic people as well. And touching on being a person of your word, as I said to Huberman, he shared the podcast after we'd done it together.
To his audience.
Yeah, like,
That's huge.
it's huge. But this is one thing I talk about in my keynotes. Being a person of your word, tying into personal brand is so important. And I say that to people. I say when I talk about conscious awareness, which is one of the pillars of leading a great life, a chapter in my book, it's one of the number one things to leading a great life, because if we're not conscious about the thoughts we're thinking, the words we're saying, and our actions, then we're never going to be able to live the life that we want, right? And when it comes to our actions and our words, this is a big deal. If you say to someone, yeah, I'll do that for you. I have a lot of people that come to me if they're writing books and they ask, can you write a blurb for me or whatever? If I know them, I will for sure do that and have a belief in their book, right? If they're a complete stranger, not so much, just because I don't know you. So I feel funny then writing a blurb for someone that I've never met, right?
Fair call.
So I will be a person of my word. And I did one for someone the other day, and I wasn't going to say, yeah, I'll do it, and then let the person down and not do it. But at the same way, I am being a person of my word when I say, sorry, this doesn't, I don't know you, so it's probably, you're better off going to someone that does. And they respect me for that. When it came to Huberman, he said to me he loved the conversation, was going to share it. He could have just said that, and then it would have come to the time where the episode comes out and I expect him to share it and he doesn't. And so then all that beautiful time that we've spent together, I think, well, he didn't end up sharing the episode. He's not a person of his word. And that makes me not feel good. And that makes me feel a bit less of him and then less of his brand, right? But he didn't. He loved the conversation and shared it. What he said was he was going to collaborate on a reel. He totally did that. Wow. And that was sharing the episode to his followers. And I cannot say anything bad about him. He's such a wonderful, wonderful person, right? And so again, when I teach people, I say you must be a person of your word. It's okay to say no in business. There is not a problem with that. But don't say yes and then don't do it. That is ruining your brand. And people speak.
Yes.
People speak. If I was to say that I was going to do something and I didn't do it, and then, I upset Sally, and then Sally's gone to tell Gina, and then this one and that one, and then they don't want to come on my podcast, or they don't want to do mindset coaching. They don't want to come to a live show of mine or whatever it is, because they're like, you know what, she's not really living the talk. She talks the talk, but she's not walking the walk. I don't want that. I want to be sincere in what I'm saying. And sometimes if that's no, that's also okay.
That's really powerful. And I do believe that I've seen this as people become more successful, particularly financially. I would say for the vast majority, as people that I have observed in my circle or sphere. So they might not be in my direct circle, but they're people I've interacted with, maybe helped out some way, and they're sort of sitting on the outside tier. We don't chat all the time. The vast majority of them become better people as they become more successful because they're becoming successful in all ways, not just financially. However, I see a slither of 10 to 20% of people, it's probably about that much, that just become horrible. And it's like they've been waiting their whole life to say, told you so, and now I can act like this. And what I'm talking about with this, to put some shape around it, committing to a Zoom meeting and then I'm just not showing.
Oh, that is my worst.
At all.
Yeah.
Like a full ghost.
Yeah.
And then all mediums of contact showing up. And it's not necessarily happening to me. I've had this come back to me. Now, if I've endorsed that person for their company and what they do, that's now reflecting on me as well. But even taking me out of the equation, I feel horrible for the person who has stood up. Yet I feel sad for the person who doesn't observe that lack of integrity is harming them.
Absolutely.
Because they're measuring on a different stick.
Yeah.
They're measuring, well, my money keeps getting bigger, so I'm obviously becoming a better person overall. And the people that don't agree are just haters.
But you're also, when you do something like that, you're saying my time is more important than yours.
And they believe that because they're measuring it on a different scale.
That's ego.
Yeah. It's an unhealthy ego, I think.
But also someone who's going to do that and they don't even have a PA or something that can write and say this person's running late or can we reschedule or whatever it is, you're not going to get very far in life.
Yeah, look, sometimes they do, but sometimes it will limit them like we're saying. But I just...
But you think they do because you can see an external perspective.
Again,
but you can't see the internal what's going on, right? And I don't believe that if you show up in the world acting like that and, organising meetings and not turning up, that it's not going to have the flow-on effect back to you, you know. And you think from, oh, look, it looks like they're doing well, their business. You're only seeing the highlight reel, right? You're not seeing what happens when they get home, when they're with their family, or maybe they don't have a family because they're working so hard. They haven't been able to foster, you know, relationships. We always don't know the whole picture, but I don't think it's a great way to conduct yourself in the world.
Yeah, I agree. You touched on before how you can visualize something and it pretty much comes true because the mind is like, it can. It's possible, right? That the mind is, you know, the way I interpret this, the mind is kind of like the control center for the body.
Yeah.
And then you can actually embed learning and memory within your body. And that's where like a lot of this fear and fight and flight freeze comes from because, you know, it's evolutionary, but people are naturally looking out for what can go wrong. I was exposed to this probably in person first when I shared the stage with Alicia Camplin, who was an Olympic skier, aerial acrobat skier. She won the gold and she broke her back substantially before the Winter Olympics.
Oh, wow.
And so she had like some incredible amount of time in traction, like not even out of the hospital, and got out of the hospital to even try skis on again, like weeks before she was actually had to go perform. Most of them were saying, you're not going to be strong enough. You're not even going to have muscle. You're going to atrophy. And her coach, every day, they put fans on in the hospital while she's in traction to feel the cold wind against her face, visualize being at the top, going down to do this acrobatic ski. So she did that over 5,000 times, apparently. And it was quite a routine, you know, like it was some, I hope I haven't misquoted it there. Quite a routine. Now, there's no way she would have been able to pull that move off if she hadn't practiced it so many times in her mind. But she wasn't able to actually practice that move before she went on because she wasn't strong enough yet. She couldn't take the risk of breaking. And it had to be the gold medal performance. It couldn't be early in the thing because you spend all your good moves too early. So even though you said before you can't only do the mind, it is incredible, though, how far you can go with just using the mind.
Absolutely. But she's prepping the mind for being able to do, you know, whatever it is that she's doing, you know, the move, right? So a lot of what she's doing in that, obviously there's a huge physical component, but a lot of it's to do with her mind as well. So she's training herself. So when she's able and she's in a position where she's leaving hospital, whatever it is, she already has the mind down pat because she's practiced and practiced and practiced. And it's the same way, the things that I'm thinking about, I'm already prepping myself for them. So when they come to fruition, I've already experienced it. So I'm not up there as a stunned mullet, not knowing what to do because I've been prepping my mind in the state of the live show or the keynote speech or whatever it is. And when I'm there, I don't freak out because I've been there before. You know, you said it earlier, the mind doesn't know the difference between when you experience it with your eyes closed or when you experience it with your eyes open. So when you're prepping the mind, you've got this advantage already when you get there.
Yeah, so you don't have the fight, flight or freeze and you get into flow.
Exactly.
I really like that. Now, talking about flow and growing, and you have grown so much. You've come from this background, like you said, there was corporate in there. You know, realestate.com.au was on your resume.
Yes, I know. I was going to say, because I saw a lot of your backgrounds there, I was like, do I mention that I even worked at realestate.com for a period of time?
Yeah, well, like, I was involved in a group. It
was so long ago, though.
Yeah, no, I saw when it was. It was a really formative time, though, for REA.
Yes.
So it was around that 06, 08, I think, from memory.
Yeah.
And was that under Greg Ellis, the CEO then?
Yes.
Yeah. So his successor, Tracy Fellows, came in because Greg did a lot of things.
Yeah, I only knew Greg.
Yeah, so Tracy's an incredible leader. She then ended up getting poached out of REA Group and going to News Corp, which are a large shareholder. But yeah, Greg was at a time where there was a lot of change going on in the industry, and it's where the world was trying to get rid of newspapers and go to online platforms. And, you know, with News Corp being a bigger shareholder of REA at the time, and Fairfax being the biggest shareholder of Domain, the competitor in Australia of the duopoly, they were trying to take their paper business and put it online. And, you know, still people in Australia were very rusted onto the paper, the Age down here in Melbourne, the Wendy Courier in Sydney, like, you know, Courier Mail in Brisbane, etc. And so he shook it up a little bit because he brought in precinct-based pricing. And that's where like the wealthier areas had to pay more for the same online ad as the cheaper areas, and that upset the industry a lot. And then Tracy came in after he had done great work for the shareholders in the company, but kind of there was a bit of bruising around. And Tracy did a really good job of engaging with the industry. And I became part of their T20 group, 20 thought leaders. Yeah, so they got like real estate principles. And that was more around 2014, 15 when I started touring with books and stuff before I had kids. And I saw how big the job was of REA to be a public company with foreign investment, with Australian investment, with a shaking up industry and great leadership at the front. And that leadership that you've observed along the way has helped you become an outstanding thought leader in your own right, educating people as you go. There's a lot of people on listening right now or watching that want to build a personal brand for themselves. And I can't help imagining they're thinking, that's fine for you there, Sarah, but you've come from media, you've come from PR, you've come from marketing, you've come from big corporate, you've been around all these pros. Is it even worth me trying to start a personal brand now in this saturated market? What am I going to talk about? How do you address that for those people?
Well, I think there's room for everyone, right? Like no one person is better than another, but if you want to be good at anything, you've got to become a master at what you do, right? And I say this to my kids the whole time. I'm like, for example, my son, he played guitar for a period of time and he never practiced. And we paid every year the tuition fees and he didn't practice. And it'd get to the end of the year where they do the show and he was woeful. He was so bad. And then I was like, you know what? There's no point us paying for you to do guitar when you're not even practicing. And he's like, you know what? You're right. Last year, my daughter, she starts guitar. You know, she's 10. She's obsessed with Taylor Swift. She's got a great voice. In 1 year, and she's younger than my son, she could outplay him. Why? Because she practiced. She got up there at the end of the year and she did her performance. She was unbelievable because she is becoming a master of something that she wants to create. For anybody who's listening, of course you can start doing your personal brand, you know, if you want to start a podcast, if you want to be a keynote speaker, if you want to start a business to do with whatever it is that you enjoy doing, always follow your dream. But you got to get down to basics and work out how it is that you can become a master of what you do, right? There's so many people who just go in average. And they go in average and they keep being average and then they bomb out and they don't understand why they bombed out. Why? Because you never did any research into how you could get better. Look at the best people in the fields you're in. You know, I watch the other podcasters, not the ones in Australia. I watch the ones in America. I watch what Mel Robbins is doing. I watch what Stephen Bartlett's doing. I watch what Alex Cooper's doing. Why? They're the best podcasters in the world. So is Rogan. I listen to the way that they interview people. Yes, I genuinely love the medium. So that is also, you know, don't do something if you don't enjoy it because you're never going to have any fun. But I'm constantly engaging in what they're doing because I want to learn more. If you think that you get to a point where you're the best, then think again, right? There's always going to be people that are better that you can learn from, but watch the people in your space that are doing it well, right? That is the first place to start and then become a master of your craft. And, you know, as I said earlier, do something that you enjoy and you have a real interest in. Because if you start off doing something that you don't really have much interest in, but you think it's going to make you money, well, that's good to a certain point. But then you're going to burn out. You're not going to enjoy it. It goes back to what I said earlier. I mean, what a gift it is these days to be so busy with the work that I love. I mean, I love it. I just recently were in Australia in summer. I was on summer holidays, just got back to work. And I thought, wow, I get to go back to a job that I absolutely love. And I've created that for myself. And I was in jobs for many years that I hated. I absolutely hated. But I knew that's not where I wanted to stay. And I did them for a period of time because I didn't know any better. And then I moved into the area that interests me, which for me was entertainment. It took time. I didn't go out of university and step into entertainment jobs. It took time. And sometimes the road is not straight, it's jagged, and there are bumps and hills, and that's absolutely okay. Because if you have a dream in your heart and you become a master of your craft, you will get there in the end.
That's powerful. It sounds simple, but it's powerful as that mastery piece that you just spoke about. And what a great example with your kids.
Yeah.
Because your daughter's leaned into it and just gone for it, and then it started accelerating. That can have a spin-off effect, I suppose. Did your son pick up the guitar and go more? Still doesn't love it enough.
That's fine. He doesn't love it enough, right? That's okay. There are other things that he is good at.
Yeah.
But if you're not practicing, you're never going to become good at it. Like if you did your podcast once every 3 months, you're never going to be an amazing interviewer because you're not sitting there and you're not practicing. You know, I go back to the first season of A Life of Greatness, my podcast, and sometimes I'm a bit cringe with listening to it because I was new to my craft, right? Even though I'd had all this experience and I taught people how to interview and it did come naturally to an extent, I wasn't as good as what I am now, but that's absolutely okay, right? So you get better by practicing more and by watching people around you, listening, whatever it is, having a mentor. You get better by learning from people who have done and walked that road before you, right? And there's always someone that's walked the road before you.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And I take a leaf from your book when it talks about observing those that are best at it. Like the first podcast I ever started listening to was Tim Ferriss. And at the time, it was really great for me because I was developing a lot more wellness habits to go with my kind of high-performance business life. And I had a lot of undoing of bad habits. And he was very good at that life hacking, biohacking.
Yes.
He's introduced me to other people that have become my kind of mentors in one way or another. And some of them I've got to meet.
Wow.
Which is so great. And I really love it when you can listen to one episode of something and move in some way rather than having to be part of a big, long series. And I found that with your interview technique and your live interview technique, you put so much value in it because you're like, what's this audience want to know? And you're asking those questions and it's going, boom, straight from the source, possibly even sometimes cutting back the amount of words that you can say so the audience can have great value.
You know what as well, for me, when it comes to the podcast, when it comes to live shows, and what we're doing today, which is so great, it's a conversation. It's not question answer. And it's interesting, I'll tell you, when I started my podcast, A Life of Greatness, Andy Lee, I didn't actually even ask him. He said, you know, I can listen to a couple of episodes if you want some advice. And I said, sure, I would love for you to do that. I mean, what a great honor. And he said to me, he'd listened to a couple, and he said, this is 7 years ago, and he said, you know what? You don't talk enough. It's just question, answer. And I think I was so scared about not wanting to be this podcaster that talks over people, which, you know, I still wouldn't do today, but I wasn't putting enough of myself in. And when it goes to personal brand, if you're creating a podcast, people need to know you. Because, you can have the best guests in the world, but they also go on other podcasts. What's going to make someone come back to A Life of Greatness and keep listening? Sarah. So they need to get to know Sarah, the way that she interviews, a bit about her life. And that was really great advice for me because it wasn't like I'm going to be, 60% of the conversation, but I was going to ensure that it wasn't just question, answer. It was a conversation. And I think that changed a lot of things for me.
Oh, yeah, it's evident. You can see that, like, I've listened to some early ones, some middle ones, and some recent ones, and been to one of your live ones. And, yeah, you're right at the forefront in Australia, for sure.
Thank you.
And these guests you bring on are incredible. So, yeah, I'm very honoured to have you on here today. Because we've got such a big business audience, I'd like to just touch on how you've been able to spin this flywheel and get a business benefit, an income benefit, asset benefit off the back of building your personal brand. So what would you say is at the center of your personal brand now? Is it podcasting? And then how does that spin off to your consultancy, your speaking, your books?
Yeah, it's podcasting is definitely the backbone of it all. And obviously that comes through advertising and things like that. This year, we'll probably see more in the live show space. I started that a couple of years ago and I absolutely love that. Obviously that can go either way, can be lucrative, it can be not, depending on who it is that you're working with and this and that. But I love that space. From that obviously as a mindset coach leads me to having some clients. I ensure that I don't do a lot of people because I don't have enough time,
Not
firstly.
yeah.
And now I do charge premium prices for it. So I do get a lot of executives and athletes as well, and business owners. But from that too is keynote speaking. I actually get a lot of my clients from keynote speaking because I get asked to do a lot of corporates. And when I give a lot of keynote speeches, people will come up to me after and say, do you do coaching? So I take on a handful of clients at any time. And then obviously I had the book last year as well. And there's always different opportunities that pop up here and there. So that's kind of the biggest things that are within my business and what paying the bills are for the moment. But one piece of advice I want to give to people is I didn't move, as you heard in my story, to my own business straight away. I was working big hours. I was producing, as I said, a Hamish and Andy's podcast, a true crime podcast. I was at that time, Josh Frydenberg was the
federal treasurer.
Yeah, the federal treasurer of our country. And I was doing a podcast with him. And then I had my own podcast, A Life of Greatness, that I was also producing that by myself at that stage. I had an audio producer and a video producer, but I actually was doing my own producing too. I actually, and because I loved it, I can't believe I had that much work going on. Anyway, this is quite a few years ago. I wanted to get to my podcast to the stage where it was big enough that I could let go of all those other things and move over. But it took years. It took quite a few years to do that. But I knew that if I just moved to looking at and doing my podcast solely just focusing on that, I wasn't getting the income of the other things. So I wasn't stupid about it. Right? It takes time for a podcast to earn money. It takes time to be known enough for people to then invite you to give keynote speeches. It takes time to do a live show. You have to build up an audience. You can't do a live show with no audience. You're not going to be able to sell tickets. So these things all take time. And so I had to juggle a couple of things whilst doing it, but I got there in the end.
You certainly did. This period of time has just flown in true flow zone style. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know our listeners and viewers will as well. What are the main platforms people should connect and get more into your world on?
So you can obviously listen to my podcast, A Life of Greatness, on Apple, on Spotify. Our new season, which starts first week of Feb, is on YouTube as well. So you can find me there. Otherwise, Instagram for social media. I'm on LinkedIn as well. They are them, and I've got a website, sarahgrynberg.com. All tags, all handles, I should say, are Sarah Grynberg.
Right. Well, you're omnipresent, by the sounds, which is exactly how your magnetic personal brand works. So, Sarah Grynberg, thank you very much for coming on Flow Zone.
Thank you for such a wonderful conversation. I've appreciated it a lot.
Me too.